The knitting frame or stocking frame was invented in 1589 by William Lee of Calverton. It's a manually operated machine requiring the operator to use both hands and both feet. We're here in the framework knitting workshop of Martin Green, one of the last framework knitters left in Leicestershire, to see him working on one of these historic machines. As you can see, it's a complicated piece of equipment, and to help us understand how it works, we're going to pay a visit to Paul Knight at Wigston Framework Knitters Museum. The two key parts of the machine are the special needles called bearded needles, which stop the new row of stitches or loops from being dropped, and the sinkers, which form the next row of loops. Here's Paul to explain further.
Here we have a model of the bearded needle, and this part is the beard. We will have a loop in the end of it, new loop here, and that loop is going to go across there, but we're closing the beard with the presser bar. That's the actual size of these needles, and there's a pair held in a lead block, and then that block is clamped into the machine. The needles actually don't move. It's the jack sinkers that do all the knitting. This is a jack sinker. It's actually this portion of the machine that does all the knitting, and it's this bit here. And it pivots in the hole, so you actually move the machine round the needles. The needles don't move. So that's how you framework knit, and we'll just do it slowly just to show you what's happening. We've got one stitch or loop in the end of the bearded needle here. That's now at the back of these things, which are called sinkers. So we're going to take the yarn across and drop every second sinker. So that forms a loop over every pair of needles. Now we're going to drop the rest of the sinkers. So now there's a loop over every single needle. That new loop is now pushed forward under the beard with the old loop at the back. The presser bar is closed, and we bring the other loop across the back of the beard and then drop it down to form your stitch. Here we have the 4 pedals in the machine. The first one is the sink pedal. That will drop all of the sinkers down past the needles. The 2 outer wooden pedals are to take the yarn carrier backwards and forwards across the needles. The middle one is the presser bar, which will close all of the needles.
The framework knitter did not make his own needles. These had to be bought in, but he did make the lead blocks which allow the needles to be clamped into the knitting frame. These blocks are made by pouring liquid lead into a piece of equipment called a needle mould. But remember, it is the lead block and not the needle which is being made.
This is a needle mould. The needles which are bought locally are placed into the machine. The lead's not there yet. Close it up and we pour molten lead into there, and that gets us the needle. And it's the lead portion that is clamped into the machine.
We're now going back to Martin Green's workshop for him to explain one of the developments of the knitting frame which helps the knitter to make more complicated designs. He'll also be explaining one of the shortcuts that an experienced knitter can use.
So this machine is a 34 gauge straight bar knitting machine, an old stocking frame, and the transfer bar across the front here is used for transferring the stitches laterally from one needle to another, and there's lots of points in it. You can shog the transfer bar from the left to the right by one needle. There's one needle movement in it, so when I want to do a transfer, I'll just do one. That's a knitting row. When I want to do a transfer, I push the bar in, pick a stitch up, shog it across to the left and put it back on that needle, and to do a second stitch. And then when I knit the next four, where those empty needles were, it leaves a hole, which is the lace transfer. So the normal procedure on these machines is to divide after you've drawn the stitch. So you've drawn the stitch with the jack sinkers, which is that bit there, and then it's normal to push the dividers down and to halve the size of the loop, pull it underneath the beard, shut the beard and pull the stitch over the top. But when I first went to Hucknall and watched the framework knitters there, they didn't divide. What they did was to draw the loop and then to sit the sinkers on the top of the loop, pull that undivided loop underneath the beard, shut the beard, and then as they pull the stitch over the top, at that point they divided the stitches. And it cuts out one movement in the knitting cycle and obviously saves them a few seconds on each one.